run bill sides with the most anti-veteran president in American history. Trump has fired 6,000 veterans, inflicted mass VA layoffs, and killed hundreds of veteran services contracts. Trump even plans to lay off another 83,000 VA workers, and on top of that, this cut-and-run bill makes even deeper cuts to the health care services for all those who bravely served our nation. Democrats are more than willing to back bipartisan funding legislation, but we will never sell out our seniors, veterans, and children like this cut-and-run bill shamelessly does. I yield back. Vote no.
Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to my good friend, distinguished member of the Rules Committee, and gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank my friend from Oklahoma. My, how times have changed. How many times have we been sitting on the floor of the House listening to our colleagues on the other side of the aisle saying, a CR is the greatest thing since sliced bread. We must have the CR. Because when some of us were saying, wait a minute, Mr. President, wait a minute, President Biden, maybe we should actually secure the border of the United States instead of letting millions of people flood in and kill Americans and let fentanyl flow into our communities. So when we wanted to secure the border and we dared to say that the funding should actually reflect that, and we threatened to, hey, maybe we should actually have a fight on spending, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle said, CR, we got to have a CR, our precious CR. Well, here we are. And what are we doing? Our colleagues oppose the CR. Why? Because we would have spending frozen for 6 months, down about $7 billion, but importantly, allow DOGE and allow our friends in the administration to continue to expose the absurdity of federal spending. How about $1.5 million to advance diversity, equity, inclusion in Serbia's workplaces? $70,000 for production of a DEI musical in Ireland. $2.5 million for electric vehicles in Vietnam. $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia. $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. This is what our Democratic colleagues are fighting for, to continue to fund absurd programs rather than do the common sense work of what we're trying to do, to have more beds for ICE, secure the border of the United States, ensure that our defense is funded, ensure that we're able to hold spending in check so we can actually have a chance of saving this great country. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
The gentleman confirms what we've been saying all along, impoundment. I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Maine, the distinguished ranking member of the Interior and Environment Subcommittee, Ms. Pingree.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much to the ranking member for yielding me this time. I oppose this full-year continuing resolution and urge my colleagues to reject it. If we vote no and reject this CR, we can go back to work and negotiate a regular full-year spending bill. This full-year continuing resolution is not a responsible way to govern. The bill does not set funding levels for individual programs, and because it doesn't, it creates another dangerous opportunity for President Trump and Elon Musk to defund congressional priorities. And we all know what a disaster that has been for our country, an illegal, unconstitutional disaster. It is the duty of Congress to negotiate regular spending bills. This means that we actively decide on every individual program's funding level, and we make adjustments where necessary. For example, the Indian Health Service needs an additional $345 million just to maintain current direct health care services. This continuing resolution fails to provide those funds, so tribal communities will experience a lower level of health care service. A regular bill also gives very specific directions to agencies to carry out specific work. For example, in prior years, in the Interior Bill, we have directed the EPA to conduct PFAS research that will help farmers, ranchers, and rural communities manage the disastrous impact PFAS has had in places like my home state of Maine. Under this continuing resolution, without our direction, this administration may decide that work should stop. As ranking member of the Interior and Environment Appropriations Subcommittee, I'm deeply concerned that the Republican majority is giving the administration a free pass to abandon programs that protect the public from pollution, that safeguard human health, and that address the climate crisis. I urge a no, and I yield back my time.
Gentlewoman from Connecticut reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to my very good friend, distinguished gentleman from New York, Mr. Lawler.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
As the great George Costanza once said, it's not a lie if you believe it. And that's what we've heard today from my Democratic colleagues. A bunch of lies that maybe they sincerely believe. The reality is this bill does not touch Social Security. It does not touch Medicare. It does not touch Medicaid. Those programs are fully funded and protected. Our veterans fully funded and protected. Fiscal year 24 was a total of $1.665 trillion. Fiscal year 25, of which we are voting to complete with this CR, is $1.658 trillion. The reduction of $7 billion is because community project funding that has already been paid, already been approved as part of fiscal year 24, is not going to be double paid. So we are saving $7 billion by removing it, as it should be. Why would we pay for projects that have already been paid for? The fact is that we have to keep the government funded and open. Why anyone would vote to shut the government down is beyond me. And when Joe Biden was president of the United States, I voted every time to keep the government funded and open. And the idea that we're going to shut it down because the priorities changed, well, guess what? The administration changed. That's the reality of elections. Donald Trump won in November. Republicans won the House and the Senate. And so, yes, budgets will change. But the fact is that we have to keep the government open. And I would remind my colleagues, the reason we're in this situation is because Senate Democrats under Chuck Schumer passed exactly 0 appropriations bills on the Senate floor. 0. There was nothing to negotiate. They couldn't pass a bill. They refused to pass a bill.
An additional 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. They refused to pass a bill. We passed appropriations bills on the floor last year. We were ready to conference. We were ready to negotiate. Chuck Schumer failed in his responsibilities. It's now incumbent on us to pass a CR through the House and for the Senate to do its job and keep the government open and funded. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentleman from Connecticut
We can pass
is
a
recognized.
we can pass a 1-month CR and do that and do what we need to do to keep the government open. There is an alternative. I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from New York, the distinguished ranking member of the Commerce, Justice, Science Subcommittee, Ms. Meng.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in opposition to this partisan bill. As ranking member of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on CJS, I cannot stand by as the GOP slashes funding for law enforcement, the courts, NOAA, which includes the National Weather Service. This bill hurts our local police officers by taking away $247 million from their public safety technology and equipment. Additionally, it cuts $350 million from projects that support community efforts to prevent crime, improve law enforcement, to provide precincts with equipment to prevent car theft, and provide victim services. These are projects that Republicans and Democrats on our committee approved and agreed on. Furthermore, the bill does nothing to prevent this administration from gutting NOAA. As a result, the life-saving weather forecasts we all receive will be less accurate and timely. Federal funding cuts in the GOP's continuing resolution are dangerous to communities like Queens and so many others. This includes Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and SNAP benefit, which serve as a lifeline for millions of Americans. Let's be clear, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are not entitlements. They are earned benefits that hardworking Americans pay into throughout their lifetime, so they have the opportunity to retire with dignity. Mr. Speaker, this bill allows the administration to fire thousands of employees at the Social Security Administration and close offices nationwide, which will mean long wait times and delayed benefits for families. For these reasons, at the appropriate time, I will offer a motion to recommit this bill back to the House Appropriations Committee. If the House rules permitted, I would have offered the motion with an important amendment to this bill. My amendment would prevent any law or executive action from eliminating, restricting, or reducing access to these programs lawfully owed to beneficiaries across the nation. I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record the text of this amendment. I yield back.
Gentlelady, without objection, Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to my very good friend, distinguished chairman of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, Mr. Calvert of California.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank my good friend, the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Cole, who's done an excellent job of putting this continuing resolution together under difficult circumstances. The appropriators tried to come to an accommodation, but we weren't able to get there. So the best alternative we have today is this continuing resolution, which does good things for our country. It obviously keeps the government shutdown from happening, and the American people and fully funds our core government services. But something that I'm interested in, and I think most members are interested in, is our national security. This continues to fund our national security. It makes sure that the young men and women who serve our military, especially our enlisted soldiers, who are going to get a historic pay raise, the highest pay raise they've had in 40 years. A lot of these E1s that come in and make $11 an hour, their pay is going to be put up significantly. This is something that I think would need to happen, so I would hope my friends on the other side of the aisle would not vote to diminish these individuals' pay that they need very much. This also supports important weapon systems, the Virginia-class submarine, the Columbia submarine, shipbuilding across the United States, our satellite construction, rebuilding the ordnance for the United States that we need desperately. So a vote against that would stop all of that. And so to me, Mr. Speaker, this is an extremely important vote for our national security. I would hope that everyone would vote for that, vote for the continuing our government, and to make sure that these weapon systems are delivered on time for the American public. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Oklahoma is reserves, and the gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized.
Let's have the 1 month CR that's been introduced as an alternative and do the business of the House and pass appropriations bills. I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Florida, the distinguished ranking member of the State and Foreign Operations Subcommittee, Ms. Frankel.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. Well, I'll tell you why I'm voting against this bill. It doesn't lower any of my constituents' costs. Instead, it gives the Trump administration free rein to continue its chaotic, lawless dismantling of U.S. influence in the world, gutting nearly all our humanitarian, development, security, and global health programs that constitute less than 1% of our federal budget. And these are not serious cost-saving measures. Instead, they make us less safe, less prosperous, less healthy. Counterterrorism programs halted, contracts with American farmers canceled, our children are left wasting away, bird flu, Ebola, and HIV spreading, education programs ending, all done without any thought or any reason. And the vacuum's left for China, Russia, and extremists to fill. We should not be handing this president a blank check to continue his harmful sledgehammer approach to how we spend taxpayer money. I urge a resounding no vote on this bill.
Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady Connecticut is recognized.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Illinois, a member of the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Quigley.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, there's a national shortage of more than 7 million units of affordable housing across America and more than 771,000 people experiencing homelessness. The CR does nothing to lower the cost of housing. That's what I was going to talk about for my 2 minutes, but after listening to this debate for so long, I think the significant correction has to be made. Programs are not fully funded and protected if you gut the agencies that operate them. Programs are not fully funded and protected if there's no one there to operate them. Under President Trump, spending bills have become a farce. He's not following the previous spending bills law that we passed. Are we saying, well, this time we really mean it? This time the president really promises he's going to follow the law. And that we don't get to the point where Article 1 is optional. Our constituents are asking us, however great you say this bill is, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, they're going to blame us because we believed you this time. And we believed the president who, when he gets in the room with the truth, a fight breaks out, as we have seen time again in the last month. So don't, with all due respect, don't tell us what's in this bill, how great it is, how we need to read it, when he doesn't have to follow it. And you don't complain when he doesn't follow it, and you abdicate your responsibilities on Article 1 and as appropriators. And I yield back.
Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the United States President. The gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I continue to reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New Jersey, the distinguished ranking member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Pallone.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of my colleagues on the Republican side earlier asked what Democrats are fighting for. And I want to say I'm a proud Democrat fighting for America's health care. And I want to stress that this partisan Republican bill cuts American health care. This bill slashes funding for our community health centers, which provide care for millions of people, as well as our nation's teaching hospitals, which train the next generation of doctors. It fails to reverse the Medicare physician pay cut, which endangers access for seniors, especially those in rural and underserved communities. It also does nothing to stop Republicans' planned catastrophic cuts to Medicaid. Rather than voting on this partisan bill, we should be working together to lower costs and expand access to health care like the bipartisan agreement we had in December. That bill provided long-term certainty and funding increases for our community health centers, for our teaching health centers. It lowered drug costs by taking on unfair PBM practices and addressed the Medicare cuts to physicians. Unfortunately, Republicans walked away from this agreement because Elon Musk opposed
Gentleman's
it.
time's expired. Gentlelady's reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady is recognized.
Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from New York, the distinguished ranking member of the Small Business Committee, Ms. Velasquez.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, and thank you for the gentlelady for yielding. I rise today in strong opposition to this reckless Republican funding bill. Republicans claim this is a clean CR, but the facts tell a different story. This bill slashes $23 billion from veterans' benefits, turning its back on the brave men and women who serve our country. It guts health care, leaving families, children, and seniors vulnerable, and it slashes affordable housing, putting thousands, including veterans, domestic violence survivors, and people with disabilities at risk of losing their homes. If these cuts weren't bad enough, the Vice President said this morning that this administration will continue to refuse to spend money on programs they don't like. I will not vote for a CR that greenlights these dangerous cuts. Democrats are ready to fund the government, but we will not stand by while Republicans sell out the people we are sworn to serve. I urge my colleagues to reject this dangerous bill. I yield back.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady is recognized.
I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, the distinguished ranking member of the Veterans Affairs Committee, Mr. Takano.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this partisan Republican spending bill because it guts the Pact Act and abandons veterans exposed to burn pits and other toxins. House Republicans claim to support the Pact Act, but their actions tell a different story. They're eliminating the funding for Pact Act recipients starting in October, cutting off critical health care and benefits for those who sacrifice for this country. Last Congress, Democrats forced Republicans to fully fund this critical program. Now Republicans are taking Elon's chainsaw to it slashing $23 billion and breaking our nation's sacred promise to our veterans. Where you invest your money shows what you truly value. And by gutting this funding, Republicans have made their priorities clear. I stand with our veterans. I stand firm in our priorities and promises, and I will not stand by while Republicans rip them apart. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this partisan Republican spending bill.
Yields. The gentlelady's reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I continue to reserve.
The gentleman reserves. Gentlelady's recognized.
I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton.
I'm running out of time. Gentlelady's recognized.
This CR is an act of fiscal sabotage against the District of Columbia and abuse of Congress's power over disenfranchised D.C. This CR will result in an immediate cut of more than $1 billion from D.C.'s $21 billion budget 6 months into D.C.'s fiscal year. For the last 20 years, D.C. has been able to operate under the local budget enacted by D.C. for the next fiscal year for the duration of every CR. This CR does not allow D.C. to do so. Instead, the CR effectively repeals the fiscal year 2025 local budget enacted by D.C., which D.C. has been operating under for 6 months, and restores the fiscal year 2024 local budget enacted by D.C., which D.C. stopped operating under 6 months ago. This cut to D.C.'s local budget does not have the federal government any money because of D.C.'s local budget consists entirely of locally raised revenue. I urge voters to vote no.
Time's expired. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I continue to reserve.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
In that case, may I inquire how much time I have, Mr. Speaker?
You have 6 minutes.
I won't use it all, but I
That's
yield
okay.
myself the balance of my time. You know, been an interesting debate. Been a lot of things said that are exaggerations, and a lot of things said, in my view, that are fabrications. Let's talk about a few of those. There's nothing in this bill about Social Security. There's nothing in this bill about Medicare. There's nothing in this bill about Medicaid. There aren't cuts in nutrition for the poor. There's a $500 million increase in WIC at the request of the president. There's not cuts in housing. There's an increase in housing to try and adjust for inflation. We'd have been better off probably if we'd negotiated a deal, but that didn't happen. So, proactive thing. There's more money in here to take care of junior enlisted personnel. I don't think that's probably an article of much dispute. It certainly shouldn't be. And I can go charge by charge. Yes, on the toxic burn or toxic exposure fund, we're going to deal with that in the 26 bill. It's for 26. Everything's funded for 25. That's what this bill covers. It's an appropriations bill for FY25. So that's what we're covering here. We're going to deal with the 26 bill, and then we'll deal with that issue. I voted for the Pact Act. I believe in it. I voted for additional funding for it. I suspect we'll find common ground there. So there's a lot of, fireworks around this bill. Let's just talk about what it does. It's pretty simple, guys. It's a CR. It's a continuing resolution. Your own leadership came out against it before they ever saw it. Maybe that's why we have all these fabrications and hallucinations about what's in it. It's pretty short. It's 99 pages. Read it. Now, I'm sorry everybody didn't get their projects. I really am sorry about that. We don't do that in CRs. So the big cuts here are mostly the elimination of congressional projects. I think most of those are worthy. I support them. I actually support the reform some of my friend, the good friend, the ranking member, put in there. I think she did a great job for this institution. But we can't do them in a CR. We just don't do them. So people are upset about that. I'm sorry about that. But at the end of the day, there's only one important thing that matters here. You can vote yes and keep the government open. Whatever your problem is Whatever your concern is, it's going to be worse in a government shutdown, not better, worse. So whatever you're worried about, shutting down the government is not the answer to your concern. You're only going to make it worse. Keeping the government open is the right thing to do. I wish we could have gotten a deal, but we're not going to sit here and concede the executive authority of a Republican president because it upsets you. Not going to happen. We made that crystal clear, and I think that was the biggest thing. It wasn't a top-line number. We basically got to a top-line number. So we're here, and the government shutdown is 4 days away. So if you want to vote no and shut down the government in 4 days, if you succeed, that's your choice. I respect every member's vote. I've never voted for a government shutdown. I've always voted to reopen the government. I don't like government shutdowns. I don't think they work. I think you'll find if you succeed in shutting down the government that it won't work very well for you either. It never works. So I think you'd be better advised to vote yes than to have to defend a vote to shut down the government personally. But actually this body will not have the final say. It's going to go to the United States Senate, and you have the power in the Senate to shut down the government if you choose, because they have a filibuster over there. They have 60 votes. So if you're worried about it, just let it go over there. You've got the power in that body to do it. So if you want to shut down the government, your choice. But Mr. Speaker, I think the choice is crystal clear. If we took a poll on it, the American people were asked, do you want to shut down the government? The overwhelming answer would be no. Do you think you should keep the government open and keep working on our problems? That would be an overwhelming yes. So I choose to do what the American people want to do, keep the government open. That's what my constituents want. Maybe yours want to shut it down. Mine don't, and I suspect yours don't either. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I would just suggest we set aside the rhetoric and the intense feelings and just do the right thing. And the right thing is to vote yes and keep the government open. So, Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support this bill. I urge them not to vote to shut down the government, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 211, the previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. The those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill making further continuing appropriations and other extensions for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2025, and for other purposes.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion to recommit at the desk.
Clerk will read the motion.
Ms. Ming of New York moves to recommit the bill H.R. 1968 to the Committee on Appropriations.
Pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 19, the previous question is ordered on the motion to recommit. The question is on the motion. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The noes have it. The motion is not.
Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays.
Yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8, Rule 20, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Proceedings will resume on questions previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order. Passage of H.R. 1156, the motion to recommit on H.R. 1968, and passage of H.R. 1968, if ordered, as well as passes on House Joint Resolution 25. First vote will be a 15-minute vote. Pursuant to Clause 9, Rule 20, remaining votes will be 5 minutes. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is on the vote of H.R. 1156, on whether the yeas and nays are ordered. Clerk will report the title.
Union Calendar Number 2, H.R. 1156. A bill to amend the CARES Act to extend the statute of limitations for fraud under certain unemployment programs and for other purposes.
Questions on the passage of the bill. Members record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
any member wish to change their vote? On this vote, the yeas are 295, the nays are 127. The bill is passed. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question of agreeing on the motion to recommit on H.R. 1968. Offered by the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Meng, on which the yeas and nays were ordered. The clerk will redesignate the motion.
Motion to recommit H.R. 1968, offered by Ms. Meng of New York.
The question is on agreeing to the motion to recommit. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. all members voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? On this vote, the yeas are 213 and the nays are 216. The motion is not adopted. The question is on the passage of the bill. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The gentlewoman from Connecticut.
On that, I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 217, the nays are 213. The bill is passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is on the vote of the passage of H.J. 25, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. Clerk will report the title of the joint resolution.
Union Calendar Number 3, House Joint Resolution 25, Joint Resolution providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Internal Revenue Service relating to gross proceeds reporting by brokers that regularly provide services effectuating digital asset sales.
The question is on passage of the joint resolution. Members record their vote by electronic device. It's a 5-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 292, the nays are 132, one vote present. The joint resolution is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider laid upon the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is on the question suspending the rules, passage of H.R. 706, which clerk will report title.
H.R. 706, a bill to improve the biodetection functions of the Department of Homeland Security and for other purposes.
Will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? So many of favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the bills are suspended. The rules are suspended. The bill is passed. Without objection, motion to reconsider laid upon the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is on the question on suspending the rules and passing H.R. 1692. Clerk will report the title.
H.R. 1692, a bill to amend the Homeland Security Act of 2002 to enable secure and trustworthy technology through other transaction contracting authority and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules, pass the bill? So many in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative. Rules are suspended. The bill is passed without objection. Motion to reconsider laid upon the table. Pennsylvania. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition? Gentleman will suspend. House will be in order. Any discussions or conversations, please take outside the chamber. Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Republican Conference, I sent to the desk a privileged resolution and asked for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 213, resolved that the following named members be and are hereby elected to the following standing committee of the House of Representatives: Committee on Ethics, Mr. Rutherford, Mr. Garbarino, Mrs. Henson, and Mr. Moran.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to. The motion to reconsider laid upon the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Democratic Caucus, I offer a privileged resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 214, resolved.
Unanimous consent that the resolution be considered as read.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to. The motion to reconsider laid upon the table. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I send to the desk a resolution, and I ask unanimous consent for its immediate consideration in the House.
Under guidelines issued by successive speakers as recorded in Section 956 of the House Rules and Manual, the chair is constrained not to entertain the request unless it has been cleared by the bipartisan floor and committee leaderships. House will suspend. Take conversations off the floor.
The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition? Purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized. The gentleman is correct. The House will return to order. Without objection, the gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor Raekwon Williams, a senior at Groves High School in Savannah, Georgia, whose resilience and work ethic has inspired many. Raekwon has faced immense hardship, losing his father at the age of 5 and his mother in December of 2024. Throughout these hardships, he has excelled academically, participating in dual enrollment studies at Savannah Technical College, never letting his circumstances define him. As a two-way lineman from the Groves High School football team, Raekwon demonstrated exceptional work ethic and dedication, earning the respect of his coaches and teammates. His perseverance earned him the Abby DeLoach Foundation and the Savannah Quarterback Club Scholar Athlete Award, which includes scholarship funds that will help him further his educational aspirations. Raekwon's story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of community support. Congratulations, Raekwon. We are very, very proud of you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to highlight the Agricultural Commodities Price Enhancement Act. Input costs for our farmers are astronomically high right now, whether it be fertilizer, seeds, or labor, not to mention the volatility of the current world food market. On top of this, the past year was one of the worst years for farmers in North Carolina between the impacts of drought and Hurricane Helene and other factors beyond their control. Our farmers need some certainty that they will be able to farm next year if their crops are not bringing in enough income to provide for their families. The Agricultural Commodities Price Enhancement Act directly addresses this by increasing reference prices for key commodities grown in eastern North Carolina and across the United States. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to honor the life and the legacy of Julie Ann McDonald, a lifelong Missourian from Savannah who recently passed. Julie Ann was a beloved mother and grandmother who touched the lives of many in our community. Friends and family knew her as Mimi, someone who put service above herself, caring for her neighbors, her community, and especially her family. She regularly volunteered at multiple organizations and schools. She was deeply involved in her local church, and she brought joy to her book club with friends that cherished her company. Throughout a 42-year teaching career, her compassion, leadership, and dedication touched and inspired the lives of countless students who had the privilege of learning under her mentorship. A rich life and a storied legacy, Julie Ann leaves behind her husband, Martin, her sons, Ryan and Scott, her daughters-in-law, Vicki and Laura, and her 2 grandchildren, Mackenzie and Jameson. My prayers are with her loved ones and with her family. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose? For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to call out a vile attack on an American patriot, Senator Mark Kelly of the great state of Arizona. Yesterday, unelected billionaire Elon Musk, who has never served this nation a day in uniform, called Senator Kelly a traitor for visiting our nation's ally, Ukraine. A traitor is one who commits treason. That consists of giving aid and comfort to an enemy. Ukraine is not our enemy. Ukraine is our ally. Mark Kelly has served our nation honorably from 1986 to 2011 in the United States Navy, rising to the rank of captain, having served 39 combat missions during the Gulf War. During his naval career, He was awarded 2 Defense Superior Service Medals, 1 Legion of Merit, 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 4 Air Medals with Combat 5V, 2 Navy Commendation Medals, 1 Navy Achievement Medal, 2 Southwest Asia Service Medals, 1 Navy Expeditionary Medal, a NASA Distinguished Service Medal, and an Overseas Service Ribbon. He only resigned his commission to help provide care and assistance to his beloved wife, who had served here formerly, Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, following an assassination attempt on her in Tucson in 2011. Words and statements have meaning. Elon Musk needs to be held accountable for his. And today, world leaders have resoundingly stood tall aside the nation of Ukraine in agreeing to a 1-month ceasefire. The United States has also agreed to lift the embargo on armaments and will be sending 1 month of armaments to Ukraine as the rest of the world looks to Russia to be cooperative in our effort to stop the killing in Central Europe. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise in my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to bring much-needed attention to an extraordinary ball player and young man and a ball hopeful. His name is Alberto Osuna. He was born in America, and he's affectionately known as Berto. He transferred to the University of Tennessee in January after an impressive career at North Carolina and Walter State Community College, where he knocked out 45 home runs and knocked in 140 runs over 3 seasons. Despite following all the necessary steps to secure eligibility to play for the University of Tennessee, the NCAA, in their infinite wisdom, has blocked his opportunity. Students at UT have painted the rock to my left here to show their support for Berto in hopes that he might play his final season with the Vols at Lindsey Nelson Stadium. He wants to do something for his family. This is what this is all about. And over a minute, I don't have time to explain it all, but this situation just isn't about Berto. It's about ensuring that student athletes are on a level playing field, Mr. Speaker, against a bureaucratic machine and nightmare that the NCAA has become, and it seemingly continues to let down student athletes they claim to serve. Just follow the dollars, Mr. Speaker. I urge the NCAA to take some serious action and grant Alberto the immediate eligibility he deserves and take the necessary steps to prioritize the well-being of their student athletes, ensuring that opportunities for success are not blocked by unnecessary red tape. Osuna left his whole life in Tampa to come to Knoxville and play for Coach Tony Vitello and the Vols. The NCAA needs to do the right thing, free Berto, give him the time he deserves. The Vols are stacked again this year, Mr. Speaker. They're coming off a national championship. They're winning again. It's not imperative that he gets on the team for them to win. It's just the right thing. NCAA, do the right dadgum thing. And I yield the remainder of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the extraordinary life of Gwen Robinson, a dear friend of mine, an incredible leader, an incredible human being. She was one of the first people I met when I got to Cincinnati, and she welcomed me in the way she did with almost everyone, immediately kind and immediately generous. There's a real argument to be made that much of what I've accomplished, what so many of us accomplished in Southwest Ohio, wouldn't have happened without her. She fought so hard for the children in the Bond Hill Head Start program that she helped lead, making sure each one of them had the highest quality preschool. It was part of what convinced me that every child in Cincinnati deserved 2 years of quality preschool. And when we said we wanted to do that, she was there every step of the way. She poured everything into helping us get the preschool promise passed. She did the same with the public transit levy a few years later. There aren't enough words to capture her impact. Gwen was a giant and will be missed by all of us. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, here's some truth. Despite many false claims, the continuing resolution we just passed does not cut Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, or veterans benefits, or any health care benefits at all. In reality, the CR was almost entirely the Democrats' budget bill last year. So the opposition today and their vote to shut down the government is a little perplexing. Mr. Speaker, here's what this bill actually offers. It gives our troops a 10% raise, provides $6 billion for veterans' health care, invests $7.6 billion into WIC for women and infants, $425 million for food delivery programs for seniors, among other things. And, Mr. Speaker, we're paying for it responsibly. We're repurposing $20 billion in excess funding from the attempt to increase the IRS by $80 billion last year. And we're redirecting $10 billion from the Commerce Department's slush fund, funds that were not used and need to be repurposed. This CR sets the stage for a plan for a new golden era for our country, and I was pleased to support it. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to adjourn the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor Neighborhood Housing Services of Chicago on their 50th anniversary and to recognize the enduring legacy of Gail Sankara, a fearless leader for housing justice. Gail understood that owning a home was not just about having a place to live, it was about stability, opportunity, and the chance to build a future, a better future. She took on fighting the banks against redlining and was a champion of the Community Reinvestment Act and never backed down in her pursuit of fairness for working families. During the early 1980s, I had the privilege of working at NHS to see how access to affordable housing could change lives. I saw struggling families become thriving homeowners. I saw struggling neighborhoods revitalized into thriving communities. NHS has shaped many lives. It certainly played a pivotal role early in my own formation. Our work is far from over. Families are still being priced out. Displacement and gentrification are still impacting families, and the access to these programs is under attack. So today, we celebrate NHS on 50 incredible years, but also recommit the fight to housing justice. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
I'd like to ask unanimous consent to speak for a minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Last weekend when I was home, I saw a very good guy who was recently married. He already has 2 children, and he was all happy because he was buying a new house. He had to save up money for a down payment to do it. The thing I noticed, though, is that during the 2 or 3 years that it took to save for the down payment, he had to live with his in-laws, which was fine because he had a strong family, and that's the way it took to buy the house. It bothered me knowing that in other places in this country, people are just given housing. They don't have to live with their in-laws. And in essence, the government is treating them better than this example of a guy who was married and spent a couple of years with his parents. So I hope in the future that this Congress changes the rules so we no longer benefit or raise this guy's taxes to set up someone for their own house immediately. Thank you.
For what purposes the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute in order to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, colleagues. The power of the purse belongs to Congress, not to the president. And this has nothing to do with our current president, Donald Trump. This is in the Constitution, and it's clear as day, and it's been affirmed over and over again by the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to have it both ways. They want to let Elon Musk, an unelected billionaire, wreck our government with illegal cuts, but they seem to lack the courage of their convictions to actually vote on these cuts. They lack that courage because they know how toxic these cuts are. Deep cuts to health care, cuts to child care, cuts that help the most vulnerable amongst us. They won't even allow a vote on my amendment, when all it would do is to force the president to follow the Constitution. I am here with a simple request from my Republican colleagues. Abide by your oath. Stand up for the Constitution. Allow a vote on this amendment. Stand up for your own constituents and stand up for your own constitutional authority. That is what we are elected to do. That is why we are here. It is one of the main reasons we are here. Do not give our authority as Congress away to an unelected bureaucrat. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House chamber for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor the great people of Youngsville, North Carolina, ahead of their 150th anniversary in celebration, on celebration of March 17th. Originally a railroad town and a community along U.S. Highway 1, Youngsville played a pivotal role in the growth of North Carolina's agricultural and rail industries, and in turn helped develop the economy of our state and our region together. Today, Youngsville mirrors her residents. It is a vibrant, a proudly patriotic community with robust growth across the board. And yet somehow, despite this growth, Youngsville has retained its character and heart while reimagining its downtown to meet the demands of an active community. It is no wonder that young families from across North Carolina and the region have flocked to this area. As its residents know, Youngsville is a truly special place and a treasure for the great state of North Carolina. Congratulations on this anniversary, and I wish you all the best in the next 150 years. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hazel Dukes was a lifelong champion for families and children in New York and across the country. Through her decades of civil rights activism, including as president of the NAACP, Dr. Dukes fought tirelessly to build a more perfect union. Dr. Dukes broke barriers as the first Black American to work for the Nassau County District Attorney's Office, where she stood up for Long Island communities that had been long ignored or underserved. As we mourn her tremendous loss, we take comfort in the fact that Dr. Dukes' legacy will continue to live on in those that she mentored and the countless Americans who have been impacted by her life's work. May she rest in peace. With that, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, extend and revise my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of Jeremy Zivitz, a beloved father, husband, and a member of our community and a teacher at De La Salle High School in Minneapolis. Jeremy dedicated his life to teaching and touched the lives of hundreds of Minneapolis students over the years. Even in the midst of difficult health challenges, he never wavered in his commitment into educating and supporting his students. Generations of young people will carry his lessons of kindness, authenticity, and the power of connection. Jeremy saw education as more than just an avenue for teaching. He saw it as a place to help his students become their best selves. His students and colleagues alike remember him as a teacher who led with authenticity and heart. Our community will miss him dearly, and his legacy will live on. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Oregon seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and expand my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. What happened today is disgraceful. House Republicans have abandoned working Americans. They are taking housing and food from our seniors, children and families. They have abandoned our veterans, the people who have bled for our country so that we can be free. They have given this administration and its illegitimate mercenaries free license to gut agencies and services. And Mr. Speaker, make no mistake, the vote the Republicans took today is a shameful turn for this body. In the words of Danzalee Abernathy, the daughter of Reverend Ralph Abernathy, best friend to Martin Luther King and civil rights leader, We will not go quietly into this reality. The American people want you to fight back, fight on, stand strong for truth, justice, and equality for all. And Danzig and Oregon, I will continue to fight, and I hope you will stay with me in this fight. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House just voted to pass a radical partisan government funding bill. I voted no because it lets Elon Musk decide how this money is going to be spent by federal agencies. There is a lot wrong with this bill. This bill fails to lower the cost of housing and instead cuts rent subsidies for low-income Americans, including seniors and domestic violence survivors, by $700 million. This enables President Trump and Elon Musk to cancel transportation infrastructure projects already underway. These projects are reducing traffic congestion and improving subway systems. This reduces the emergency food program by $20 million at a time when food prices are on the rise. This allows Musk and Trump to fire thousands of employees at the Social Security Administration, and it cuts funding for health care for veterans who are exposed to toxins and so much more that is worse. We needed a bill that protects the middle class and makes life less expensive for residents in Westchester and the Bronx. This continuing resolution is the opposite of that. Remember, I told you so. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to state that should now the House-approved full-year continued resolution become law, it will be a legislative tragedy for Northwest Indiana that will strip away specific funding for public safety and economic development. By not including community project funding requests approved by this institution in the House Appropriations Committee just last year, Indiana's 1st Congressional District loses $4 million in approved funds to support equipment and resources for law enforcement agencies, and $7 million in approved economic development projects, and reducing health benefits for veterans and putting at risk health care for seniors and children with complex medical conditions. The House majority has made Northwest Indiana less safe and jeopardizes our potential for economic growth and the ability to create more work and wealth and put veteran health care and those veterans who were exposed to toxic burn pits, Agent Orange, and radiation health care at risk. It is shameful that we have misled our local law enforcement agencies, local units of government, and veterans and seniors. I encourage my Senate colleagues to reject this harmful measure, and with that, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
I have consent to address the House for 1 minute. I extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise in honor of Dr. Hazel Dukes, a lifelong activist, a champion for civil rights, and the president of the NAACP New York State Conference. Her fierce commitment to fighting for equality and justice is simply unmatched. She was a trailblazer in New York State and across the country, a renowned community organizer and a leading voice at the NAACP for nearly 40 years. She worked tirelessly for equity in housing, healthcare, and education. I remember sitting next to Dr. Dukes at a long meeting where we were standing for hours, clapping and cheering. I was so tired and kept trying to sit down, but she reminded me that it was a privilege to be there and to remind me to stand right back up. Her strength came from her compassion and love for our communities. The legacy that she leaves behind will inspire women, girls, and advocates across New York for generations to come. It was an honor to have known you, Dr. Dukes. May you rest in power. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Connecticut seek recognition?
I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. In recognition of National Nutrition Month, I introduced the Feed Hungry Veterans Act, legislation to permanently remove barriers to SNAP, often faced by veterans with work-limiting disabilities. According to the 2023 RAND report, 1.4 million veterans are food insecure. That is in part because many disabled veterans do not meet all of the qualifications for federal nutrition programs like SNAP. My legislation amends the definition of elderly or disabled for SNAP to include veterans with one service-connected disability rated at 60% or higher, or two or more service-connected disabilities, at least one of which is rated 40% or higher. With more than 1/3 of disabled veterans in the United States facing food insecurity, we must do more to support those who have honorably served our nation. The Feed Hungry Veterans Act is a critical step to ensuring veterans have long-term access to critical food assistance. With that, I yield back.
The chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., March 11th, 2025. I hereby designate the period from Tuesday, March 11th, 2025 through Sunday, March 23rd, 2025 as a district work period under Clause 13 of Rule 1. Signed, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Schweikert, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I'd like to yield the gentlewoman from Minnesota as much time as she may consume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would also like to thank the gentleman and my fellow member of Ways and Means, the gentleman from Arizona, for yielding me the time. Mr. Speaker, I rise to congratulate the Moorhead boys hockey team on their first state championship, defeating Stillwater 7-6 at the Excel Center over the weekend. The 2A championship win was led by this year's Mr. Hockey, Mason Kraft. The team dedicated the game to their teammate Ethan, who passed away unexpectedly last year at the age of 16. Holding up his jersey throughout the game and bringing the jersey through the handshake line, the Moorhead Spuds have made their families, community, and the whole 7th District proud. Congratulations to the Spuds. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate the East Grand Forks boys hockey team on their incredible Class 1A championship win. With what sounded like the entire community of East Grand Forks in the stand, the team defeated the St. Cloud Cathedral 2-1 in overtime. The East Grand Forks Green Wave has made their families, communities, and the entire 7th District so very proud, and I'm excited for all of you to hoist that championship banner back at home. Mr. Speaker, I rise to congratulate the War Road girls hockey team, the Lady Warriors, on their 10-year streak as section champions. These women from a small town in the northernmost Minnesota are part of one of the best girls hockey teams in the last 20 years. You have made your families and communities proud. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate Praise Live in Osakis, Minnesota, on 40 wonderful years of broadcasting. For 40 years, Praise Live has been bringing hope and faith to people across central and western Minnesota. They have even partnered with stations in Guyana and Uganda and as far-reaching as war-torn Sudan to spread the gospel and its message of encouragement, faith, and hope across Africa. Thank you, Praise Live, for connecting with, praying for, and strengthening the Christian communities you are committed to serving. I pray for a successful next 40 years. And with that, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
appreciate it. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I'm going to try something this evening. The thesis I'm going to try to sell tonight is that data is substantially a solution for us. And you go, huh? So I'm going to walk through a number of things that just came out in the new MedPAC report because, and look, I've only just started reading it, but there's a couple interesting things. I'm going to try to walk through the reality of what drives debt and deficits like I do every week. I'm going to try to walk folks through some of the actual math instead of some of the hysteria that is modern politics where we make crap up because we don't tell the total details. And let's see if we can actually make any progress here on sort of the intellectual capital of this place. So just off the top of my head, Mr. Speaker, you've seen the stories of, the butchering of federal employees. Okay, let's walk through just some of the math. You got 3 million federal employees. If 77,000 have decided to take, the early retirement offer, let's see, that's, God, I should have, dear heaven, I should have calculated this before, is 3%, 3% of the federal population. I have a chart we're working on, did not make my stack, to show the growth in the number of federal employees in the last decade. It's a little rich how many folks run around here and they want more spending for their projects, or they don't want this, or they don't want that, but at the same time, they're lined up at our doors and want more spending. If I could come to you and say, guys, we're going to try to find a way to make the way we deliver services much more efficient, much more rational. So let's actually sort of walk through a couple of the boards. This is one we start with a lot. And the number now is a bit more dour. This board's a year out of date, but I didn't want to spend the money to reprint it. Do you see the blue portion? Okay, this fiscal year, it's about 25% of all the spending is in the blue. That's what we get to vote on. That's military. That's what we call non-defense discretionary. We borrow about, let's see, last year for every dollar we took in taxes, we borrowed or we spent $1.39. So functionally 39 cents. This year it will be a little better. We think it will be only 36 cents for every dollar we take in taxes. So what that basically means is everything you and I as a member of Congress vote on is borrowed. But we have this reconciliation budget. It's one of the few times where we actually get to talk a little bit about what's in the red. But we don't get to touch net interest. Interest is interest. And some of the math coming in right now says interest this year, this fiscal year, could be about 1.1 to 1.2. I actually am a bit more dour. $1 trillion, making interest functionally the second highest expense in the federal government. Until this reconciliation budget makes it through, defenses like number 4 on spending. So Social Security, interest, functionally Medicare, defense. But when you take a look at what we're even allowed to talk about in a reconciliation budget, and you know why we do the reconciliation budget, it's so we can get around this 60-vote rule in the Senate. So we're doing all this dancing and stuff because of the Senate rules. But we can't touch net interest, and we're not allowed to go near Social Security. So think about that. That area on that last chart I just showed you that was red, the majority of it, we're not even allowed to talk about. We can't touch it. We can't do anything about it. So when you see the authorizations, that's actually why committees like Ways and Means and Energy and Commerce have such a lift. So what happens if I come to you and start to say, you have a country that's binging on debt. We're in extraordinary measures right now, so some of the daily debt calculations are a little screwed up. But before we went into extraordinary measures, we were in the $60,000, $70,000 per second. every day, every second. If my math is correct and we come in at about 2.2 trillion, maybe 2.3 trillion of borrowing this year, you got to start thinking about that. So we take in about 5 trillion in tax receipts. We're going to spend about 7 trillion, meaning about 7.25% of the entire economy is borrowed this year. And if we don't get our act together, in 9 budget years, it could be 9.2% of the entire economy is borrowed. And I was just wanted to make the point because I'd come here in the past. Interest rates have fallen dramatically in the last couple of weeks, which, remember the seesaw? We've talked about the seesaw. When the economy is really strong, or there's a shortage of capital to borrow, interest rates go up, meaning the United States, we pay a lot more in debt servicing. When interest rates go down, that typically means the expectations, the economy are slowing down, meaning our tax receipts fall. So the middle of the seesaw stays the same. I saw some people getting giddy. Look, interest rates are down. It also means actually some of our modeling in the future quarters of tax receipts also are starting to fall now. So there's no free option anymore. But you've seen some of the discussions. Ray Dalio has been out there talking about the heart attack of debt and what happens to other countries and the history of that. Going back, I think he's in his book, he's going back a couple thousand years. The United States, so here's functionally the world borrowing. China's borrowing about 17% of what we call the available capital for sovereign borrowing. Japan's borrowing about 10%. We're borrowing 40%. So we're about 25% of the world's GDP, but we're borrowing 40% of the money that goes to sovereigns. You got to understand the scale, the binging on debt. And when I get to the very last board, I'm going to show again the chart that just seems to upset people, but it's math. From today through the next 30 years, discretionary spending actually, according to CBO's 30-year model, actually ends up with it grows slower than tax receipts. But it's Social Security and Medicare. It's demographics. It's not Republican, it's not Democrat, it's demographics. Where it becomes partisan is the unwillingness to tell truth about the math, and then actually the creativity of how we disrupt the cost. So how do you actually find some of these things? This chart's a little awkward. I would have designed it a little different, but sometimes you're running around. The point we're trying to make is here was the effective interest in 2014 to the United States. Now all of a sudden we're up here, and the actual market rate we expect in the future to actually continue to consume, meaning interest is our great fragility in this country. I've told the comment many times, at our current rate of borrowing, we've almost put the bond market in charge of this country. Because if you have to bring hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars to market every month, do you screw with your banker? In many ways, that bond market now is our banker. For my brothers and sisters on the left, who often want to attack the tax reform of 2017, attack tax receipts, I've done presentation after presentation behind this microphone using the stuff from the Manhattan Institute that basically shows if we do all the Democrats' tax hikes and then do the economic adjustments, often from Democrat groups, you get about 1.5% of GDP in new tax receipts. Okay, maybe we're going to be pushed against the wall and have to do that, but we're borrowing over 7% of GDP. So it's like on Social Security. It's common that the reframe is, well, just raise the cap. Okay. In 2033, Social Security Trust Fund is empty. Our brothers and sisters on Social Security will take 17 to 20% cut. We double senior poverty in America. And when someone says, well, just raise the cap, our model is in that next year, 2034, raising the cap only covers about 38% of the shortfall, and you've wiped out the cash and the other things you actually need to also save Medicare, which actually that trust fund runs out like 3 years later. So one of the reasons for this chart is trying to demonstrate something very simple, that back when, before TCJA, the 2017 tax reform, the actual projection of what tax receipts would be, so before the tax changes, we're right on track. You see the weird blip there? That was the remarkable amount of spending that happened during the pandemic. We actually just went back to nominal. So what happens here? What happens when there's this intense hunger to play this weird blame game instead of being willing to tell our voters the truth? The vast majority of debt this decade will be interest and healthcare costs, mostly Medicare. So one more contributions to the increase in spending from 2024 to 2035. Interest. So remember, why this chart is important. Let's put it in perspective. Baseline. This is actually with the taxes going up at the end of this year, just baseline. So following current law, not the clowns that actually run around saying, let's just avoid the law and just let's pretend what we spend, we spend. The law says we're going to borrow $22 trillion over the next 10 years. Okay, that's baseline. Here's the mix of that borrowing. 24% of that will be interest of the additional borrowing. Old age survivors, Social Security will be 31%. Discretionary, 13%. Other mandatory, 4%. And Medicare, 28%. Now, the fact of the matter is old age survivor, Medicare have their own trust funds, except for the fact that within that 10-year window, at least this trust fund is now emptied. Are we allowed to talk about it? Are we allowed to do the moral thing here and maybe stop the doubling of senior poverty? But yet, the fact of the matter is maybe I'm an idiot for getting behind the microphone and actually mentioning the word Social Security because there's someone writing an attack ad on me right now for trying to save it. It's just the sickness of this place. So let's actually walk through a little bit. I saw a number of folks who actually have been attacking DOGE and the attempts to use data. Understand that some of the communication skills are haphazard. But if I came to you today and said, let's strip any partisanship, we need to find waste, fraud, abuse, modeling issues where we're doing things the wrong way, where we have models that are decades, sometimes decades and decades out of date, would you hire an army of auditors? An army of lawyers? Or would you hire data scientists? Turns out, several years ago, Congress started requiring agencies that send out payments, that cover healthcare costs, that send out checks, these things, start telling us your error reports. Okay, so for 2023, we think the reports come back at $236 billion of improper payments. Okay, that's a stunning amount of money. But that doesn't mean there's $236 billion of improper payments that have been stolen. There's a bunch of it has been, but it's more complex. And an army of auditors, it would take years to grind through this. That's why actually the miracle of technology right now, hire some data scientists. They're really expensive. Most of them actually I've met recently actually are bathing. That's both funny and shockingly true. I met one that is an MIT dropout. Apparently MIT wasn't hard enough for him. But that's actually what he does. And the failure to access data information. Well, it turns out a whole bunch of what we label as improper payments, we lacked data on understanding. So what happens when it's the data scientists that will help us grind through? I just grabbed this one because Treasury itself, not just CMS, all the other agencies, Treasury itself has $21 billion of improper payments. When you walk through what those were and why they were improper. They didn't verify household size. They didn't verify the qualifications. They didn't verify these things. That is basically data. So let's actually have a little more fun here. Types of improper payments. Okay, we actually estimate of that 36 billion. And actually, this is for 2024. The other chart was 2023. 135 billion are overpayments. Now, understand, for a lot of those, that may come through CMS, a Medicare reimbursement. CMS has the ability, months and months, a year later, to try to recapture those monies. What we're trying to get the data scientists to build us models to understand, okay, if there's 135 billion of overpayments, how much of that comes back to us and how much is, we'll call it leakage, even though leakage is with a B. And then there's, we have 12 billion unknown payments. We know payments went out, but there wasn't enough data telling us what they were. We had almost 8 billion of underpayments where we underpaid people. So you see what I'm trying to provide here is we know we have a problem. We've known we've had this problem for decades. For the last decade, we've been tracking the problem. And it's only been the last couple months we're beginning to tackle the problem and try to use technology to dive into what are these? What are these categories? And understand. Some of this you'll notice the huge spike in improper payment amounts. That's actually mostly from the pandemic when we were pushing money, shoveling money out of this place like crazy. But we've been tracking this since 2014. It's taken to now to find the technology, to find the talent to start diving into this math. And why is this just so important? If you're someone like me who believes there's trillions of dollars over the next 10 years that we can save by just modernizing the way we deliver services, you first have to identify the outliers, identify what's going on. But why is this so incredibly important? You've got to understand what we're up against. Outlays of the largest mandatory programs are projected to massively increase. So let's be a moment of brutal honesty. This is 2025, this is 2034, so functionally 9 budget years. Social Security will have a 61% increase in spending. It's just that this is our demographics. And I'm going to try to explain these numbers a little bit more. Medicare will have almost a 78% increase in spending over those next 9 budget years. Now, there's a little more for this because this has none of the offsets. So I want to try to provide a level of brutal honesty. Remember, on like Medicare, on some things you have a portion of copay, those things. So, but it's still a 75% increase, but it goes from $2 trillion spending. So 9 budget years, Medicare itself will be a couple $1 trillion, just the spending on that. If you do the offset, the payments the senior makes, okay, that's about $400 billion. It's still a 75% increase in spending. What would happen if I could come to you and say, if we would use technology, if we'd modernize? So here's the MedPAC report that came out in the last couple days. Haven't read the whole thing, read part of it. Here's last year's MedPAC report. We read all of it, highlighted it, and we actually make our staff read it. Well, it turns out around here, actually reading the actual math and the concepts. So if I came to you right now and said, like in here, there's a whole paragraph that's saying there's something wrong in Medicare Advantage data. Now, MedPAC report says Medicare Advantage, really important program. We need to keep it. But we're going to have to dive in on how to modernize how it works. Because here, Coding intensity, they made the adjustments for coding intensity, but it basically says, translates into a projected $84 billion, or 17% of total payments, meaning Medicare Advantage coming at $84 billion this year, more than fee-for-service. And that's with the adjustments for renal failure and other things. Look, and I've already started to have the MedPAC report fall apart, so if any of you talk to the MedPAC folks, ask them for better binding on their reports. So what would happen if I came to you right now and said, we can do things to fix these outliers in cost and never cut a service by changing the incentives? Instead of the incentives that the MedPAC report talks about of scoring people as sicker and sicker and taking that additional spending, how about a system that says, why don't we incentivize the providers in this program to help our brothers and sisters who are seniors be healthier? And that making your population, helping them be healthier, is actually your profit. Is that heresy? I would argue that's just good design. And we don't have a choice, because last week, the Joint Economic Committee, we published a report. And I chair the Joint Economic Committee, and I appreciate we have remarkably hardworking economists, and we're trying very hard, but we're willing to go to places that are politically dangerous but mathematically honest, which is something that rarely happens around here. But we tried to touch on things like, how fragile is U.S. debt to higher interest rates? Fact of the matter is, I did a chart a couple weeks ago that showed if the United States went back to a 6% handle on U.S. sovereign debt. Now, you go, well, that's a lot higher than we're at today. Yeah, but go back to the early 2000s, we were right up against 6%. You do realize in 9 budget years, if you are at 6%, it would mean 45% of all U.S. tax collections go just to interest. We do a chapter here on the effects of obesity to our society, to spending, to longevity, to family formation. Last year's report came in over $9 trillion. This year we even define it more to understand what happens when the single biggest spend in our society could actually be mitigated by helping our brothers and sisters in the country be healthier. Are we allowed to talk about that, or is that just heresy? Because once again, got to tell the truth, over the next 30 years, Social Security and Medicare represent all the borrowing. And it's like $116 trillion of borrowing. Discretionary, which we talk about a lot because that's where you find some of the really stupid spending, the shiny objects, is projected to grow slower than tax receipts. My point is, for everyone out there who wants to be enraged by the White House, enraged by those of us who are trying to find solutions, bring us ideas. Bring us actual math. Stop making crap up, but if you're going to give us ideas, actually maybe read your subject area first. You'd be amazed how many things we get, where if we just didn't have foreign aid, and we show the chart that it's a week of borrowing. Understand, you have a country that our baseline is going to be borrowing about $6 billion a day. How long do you think we can do that? So first, if we can find ways to do it better, faster, cheaper, read the actual reports that we've been given for a decade that actually have ideas in this, and be willing now to do the hard work of just using technology and data and modernizing. And Mr. Speaker, one of the insane things around here, when you meet many of the folks who are in our hallways demanding more spending, demanding more regulations, demanding more barriers to entry to protect their business model of their bureaucracy. They actually hate the discussion of modernizing. You're a medical professional. You know what you're doing. The fact of the matter is there's hope. I don't think there's a lot of more years we can wait, but there's ways to do this. How do we get this body, both our brothers and sisters on the Democrat side, that actually, if they'd be willing to work with us on saying, let's modernize. Let's embrace the technology. Let's do the things we know that if we were actually caring, just maybe not great politics, but it's really good economics and really good for the future of this country. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to yield back.
The gentleman yields. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Foster, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the minority leader.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to submit extraneous material for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I'd like to thank my colleagues in the Democratic Litigation and Response Task Force for helping us with this various special order hours discussing the Trump administration's various reckless actions. And tonight, I rise to bring attention to an issue that really should have all Americans on alert, which are President Trump's tariff policies. Since the beginning of this administration, American businesses, manufacturers, and families have been stuck in limbo as the Trump administration has repeatedly threatened, then implemented, then paused, then restarted tariffs, creating uncertainty and instability. The most recent policy shift, a 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico, has been fraught with delays and exemptions, leaving American businesses, manufacturers, and consumers just stuck in limbo, not knowing how to react and how to make their plans. In fact, just this morning, Trump doubled planned tariffs on steel and aluminum from Canada to 50%. And then a mere couple hours ago, a spokesman from the White House said that the tariffs on Canada were back down to 25%. You know, who knows? In true Trump administration fashion, this is complete and utter chaos. But the truth is, these tariffs, no matter if and when they go into full effect, whether it's this week or next month, they'll all ultimately have the same result: higher prices for everyday goods and a less competitive U.S. manufacturing sector. In fact, a business in my district just let me know that it's a business that makes precision formed steel tubing components. And they told me that the price of hot rolled steel is up 33% since Trump's inauguration in anticipation of these tariffs. And there is just no way that they're going to be able to avoid passing these inflationary price increases onto their customers. According to an analysis from the Yale Budget Lab, if implemented fully, these tariffs would cost the average American family between $1,600 and $2,000 a year, with working class families who can least afford it being hit the hardest. Prices would spike across the board. Electronics like computers, phones, and TVs could rise by 11%. Clothing up by 7.5%. Cars and auto parts up by 6%. Groceries up 2%, and with fresh produce rising nearly 3%. Oil and other energy costs will rise over 1.6%, making it more expensive for families to fill up their gas tanks and heat their homes. Now, Trump is trying to spin these tariffs as something that is solely a tax on foreign companies, but history and macroeconomic facts tell us otherwise. When Trump first imposed tariffs during his first administration, it was not other countries that paid, it was American consumers and businesses. Importers passed these cost increases onto their consumers, and domestic producers hiked their own prices in response. This made U.S. manufacturers less competitive worldwide. In fact, in the last administration, Trump's policies put us into a manufacturing recession well before COVID hit. And beyond hurting hard-working American families, these tariffs threaten the stability of our economy. Analysts from across the political spectrum warn that they could slash 2.3% from GDP by 2026, wiping out a lot of projected growth. Markets also reacted with great uncertainty, as they should. Stocks have dropped and consumer confidence is cratering. And for American farmers, many of whom are already facing mounting economic challenges, the situation is even more dire. The cost of critical supplies, such as fertilizer, fuel, and equipment, will skyrocket, making it harder for farmers to maintain their operations. I was just at an event earlier today with corn farmers from the Midwest. And for example, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, Canada supplies over 80% of our potash imports, which are an essential component for agricultural fertilizer. Now, guess who the next leading producers are after Canada? Russia, China, and Belarus. Now, wouldn't it be better if we could import from our friends in Canada instead of Russia, China, and Belarus? Or does our president feel differently? In any case, with increased costs, farmers will be forced to either raise prices or absorb the losses, neither of which is sustainable in the long run. And besides rising costs, farmers are already facing devastating losses in international markets. China, the largest export market for U.S. food products, has already announced retaliatory tariffs on key American agricultural goods, including wheat, corn, soybeans, pork, and dairy products. Mexico, our largest corn export market, well, they know what they'll be doing because they did it last time. When Trump did various things to insult the people of Mexico and assault their economy, they simply stopped buying corn from the United States and began borrowing it from Brazil, buying it from Brazil. Brazil, by the way, gets 2 crops a year, which when you tell that to corn farmers in the Midwest, they react. So we're in danger of losing these markets permanently if Trump continues what he did in his last go-around on tariffs. According to the USDA, in fact, the last time President Trump engaged in a trade war, it cost U.S. farmers nearly $30 billion in lost sales and market disruptions. And so in an effort to keep the farmers' heads above water, $30 billion of taxpayer money was sent their way. That's not what farmers want. For decades, American farmers have worked tirelessly to expand access to foreign markets, ensuring their products reach consumers around the world. These new tariffs will undo years of progress in expanding those markets, closing off opportunities and shrinking demand for American-grown goods in the foreign market, something which domestic consumption alone cannot compensate for. And finally, Mr. Speaker, manufacturing. Long before coming to Congress and long before my career as a scientist, I started a manufacturing company with my brother. And starting with $500 from our parents, we built a company that now manufactures over half of all the theater lighting equipment in the United States. It provides over 1,300 manufacturing jobs in the Midwest. We do hardware, software, painting, wiring harnesses, customer support, everything. And I'm very proud that we've kept those good manufacturing jobs in the United States. And that's why boosting U.S. manufacturing and creating manufacturing jobs here has always been a top priority of mine, and why I was so horrified at the damage done to U.S. manufacturing by the last set of Trump tariffs. So I watched with deep concern as the first Trump administration's tariffs and our other trade policies put us in a manufacturing recession a year before COVID even started. Once again, Trump is pursuing a failed economic policy that was going to do nothing to bring jobs back, but instead it will drive up costs, kill growth, and undermine U.S. manufacturing, the very sector that he claims to protect. Manufacturers will be hit with soaring costs. Many U.S. manufacturers rely on imported raw materials such as steel, aluminum, auto parts from Canada and Mexico, and these tariffs will increase costs across the supply chains, making it harder to produce goods economically and much, much harder for U.S. manufacturers to export their goods in a competitive world environment. So contrary to what Trump and the Republicans are trying to say, higher cost means fewer jobs. When manufacturers face rising production expenses, they're forced to either pass those costs on to consumers, further driving up inflation, or cut jobs in production. Studies have shown that Trump's previous tariffs led to job losses, not gains, in the manufacturing sector. American manufacturers will once again struggle to compete globally. By making essential inputs more expensive, Trump is weakening U.S. manufacturers against foreign competitors who are not burdened with these artificial price hikes. Not to mention, manufacturers will likely to be hit by retaliatory tariffs when they're trying to export their goods to the countries that President Trump has targeted. This is not America first. This is America last in the global economy. The last trade war was a disaster. Under Trump's first round of tariffs, manufacturers suffered as input prices soared, supply chains were disrupted, and retaliatory tariffs from other nations crushed U.S. exports. And this time, the consequences could be even worse. The truth is, there are no winners in trade wars, only those left to bear the burden of higher costs, lost jobs, and economic instability. Instead of strengthening our economy, Trump and his Republican allies are needlessly putting at risk, gambling with the livelihoods of American families. And so when the U.S. is threatened with a recession, you don't have to take my word for it. You can read the front page of the Wall Street Journal. It will be those policies who are to blame. And next, I'm glad to be joined by my colleague, Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury. As a representative of a southern border state, New Mexico, she knows all too well the importance of fair trade with Mexico for our nation's economy, for working families' wallets. And with that, I now yield to the gentlewoman from New Mexico, Ms. Stansbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for convening this special order hour. And I rise today to talk about the real-world impacts of what's happening right now in our federal government, with the dismantling of federal agencies, the free fall of our economy, and the impacts that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are having on our communities. Because what is happening right now is not normal, and it is impacting our communities in ways that many do not even understand. Right now, real people are hurting. They are scared. They don't know what's going to happen. Today in my office, I met with members of a tribal council and leaders from a tribe in New Mexico who came to visit me. Like others, they shared stories about the people in the community who are frightened about what is happening. Teachers and educators in tribal schools who've been fired without any explanation. Critical federal funds that are on hold. And when they went to meet with the Department of the Interior today, they were told that even those who are in charge of the very programs that they were meeting them about didn't know what was happening. Back home, people are frightened. They are scared. They don't know if they're going to lose their Social Security, their Medicaid, or the access to life-saving care. A few days ago, I met with the largest food bank in the state of New Mexico. They distribute food to hundreds of food pantries, churches, homeless shelters, and individual families across the state. They told me that if the cuts to food assistance go through that Republicans are proposing in their budget framework, that the number of families, and especially our children and seniors who are currently facing food insecurity, will double. There is not enough support, resources, and infrastructure in the state of New Mexico to meet the need if these programs are cut. Our food system will do everything that it can to support our communities, but it will be more severe than even during the pandemic. And every day, I am hearing from constituents in my district who have lost their jobs. These are real people, real New Mexicans, thousands of Americans who are being fired every single day by this administration for no reason. These are not faceless people, but real members of our communities. A tribal school teacher who was told in the middle of the school day that she was being fired for no reason after she had taught for years, to pack up her things and return home in front of her students. Students who don't know if they're going to be able to finish the school year and graduate. No answers, no explanation, no follow-up for how she's going to support her son and her disabled mother at home. A veteran who was on medical leave, who returned to their job at the VA on a Monday, only to find out that they had been locked out of their email. And inside that email was a nameless, faceless dismissal, letting them know that they had been fired for no reason. A dedicated public servant who drove to work every single day, 60 miles every day, to the VA hospital to serve their fellow veterans, who was never even notified as to the reason they were terminated. Just a mass email sent to thousands of federal employees across the United States. And just like the other veterans across my district who lost their jobs over the last several days, another veteran who served in the Army Reserves from 2001 to 2010, who also received that same nameless, faceless email from Elon Musk. A veteran who received an Army Achievement Medal, a Combat Action Badge, and other medals and achievements over the course of their service, who was fired with devastating impacts to their family, not only financially, but emotionally. These are the real people being impacted by this administration. An administration that seems to have no regard whatsoever for the thousands of Americans who are literally losing their livelihoods every day as a result. And while they take on these actions, while they dismantle these federal agencies, while they withhold the funds that literally thousands of organizations across the country depend upon to provide vital services across our communities, while they fire these thousands of federal public servants who've dedicated their life to service, including our veterans and members of the military, they are giving themselves contracts to replace the very programs and create new services that will give them more wealth, like Elon Musk at the FAA. They're talking about monetizing HUD programs. That's right, voucher programs that our lowest income family members and members of our communities depend on. They want to turn it into a monetary program that makes private companies money. They want to turn over mortgage markets to their crypto buddies. Well, that sounds like a good idea, right? And they're doing all of this against the backdrop of trade wars that are not only endangering the American economy, but endangering the lives of millions of Americans and making it more expensive. Now, the thing I ask myself is, what is the end goal of all of this? I mean, seriously, what is the end goal? Donald Trump campaigned for the last 2 years on lowering costs. He told the American people, if you elect me, I will make it cheaper and easier to live in America. And so I want to ask my fellow Americans, is it cheaper than it was 6 weeks ago in America? If you've been grocery shopping over the last several weeks, you are seeing that prices are higher than they have ever been. We're not just talking about the price of eggs and meat, it's everything. The price of housing, the price of groceries, the price of energy. Not only have prices not gone down, they've gone up. And now, because of these tariffs and trade wars, we know that everything is going to get exponentially more expensive. The raw materials that fuel American manufacturing and construction, more expensive. Produce and food, more expensive. Energy, more expensive. What are they doing? Why are they doing this? Why are my colleagues enabling this administration to harm the American people, enabling this administration to put harmful policies in place that are making not only more expensive for Americans, but tanking our economy? What is this all about? To what end? I ask my colleagues, honestly, Mr. Speaker, to what end is all of this? What is the point of hurting real Americans? These policies are not making life better for real Americans. It is really about stealing from the working people of this country to make the wealthier more wealthy. And if you need any more evidence of that, then all you have to do is look at the budget framework that they passed here in this chamber 2 weeks ago. Now, a couple of weeks ago when they passed this budget, they pretended like we're just trying to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. And we're going to take those savings and reinvest it into tax breaks and help the American people. But as has passed over the last couple of weeks, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. Over the weekend, Republicans were on a blitz across the news media saying that they were going to gut Medicaid. They're talking about it openly now. They're going to cut hundreds of millions of dollars from the basic programs that sustain Americans. Over the weekend, Elon Musk talked openly about gutting Social Security. This is their plan. And what are they going to do with all of that saving? Quote unquote savings? They're going to use it to give permanent tax breaks to billionaires. That's it. That is what all of this is in service to. Taking from the people who have spent their lives serving this country, proudly serving this nation, proudly working to put food on the table and a roof over their head for their families. And they're going to give that money to billionaires. That's what this is all about. It hurts my heart. My colleagues passed their budget resolution, their budget CR this afternoon, and the vast majority of them are on planes back to their districts, where they are not going to hold town halls. Their leadership told them not to, because they don't want to hear from the people who are unhappy and being hurt by these harms to our communities. So I have to ask my colleagues, why are you even here? What is this all in service of? Go home and represent your people, and come back here and have a backbone to stand up for the Constitution and the people of this country, because real people are being hurt. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Rep. Stansbury, for speaking today and to share how some of Trump's policies are going to harm your constituents. You know, in your state and near your district are national security workers, atomic scientists at Sandia and Los Alamos labs, who were fired and then unfired and are still being threatened with being fired. And I'm a scientist. I know a lot of people that are in that situation. And the damage that's done to our national security when you tell people that working at a national lab, especially a national security lab, is not a safe place in terms of being able to depend on an income to raise your family, that it does damage to our national security that can never be undone. It is not a small deal, and the fact that some 23-year-old kid with a software background is deciding they know more about the workforce that we need to make sure our nuclear weapons are safe and effective is about as bad government as you could even ever imagine. And so that's, and I'd also like to echo your questions about why does Trump do this? Why does he actually do this? The president's reputation, it's based on, as a great businessman, it's based on making a series of one-off deals. And he's a real estate deal maker, not a manufacturer, not a businessman who has real customers. And he thinks he's done a good deal when he uses all the leverage in his negotiation to make sure that he's really rooked his counterparty, his customer, to the extent possible in his real estate transactions. Now, I'm very different. I'm a manufacturer. And the last thing you want if you're a manufacturer is a dissatisfied customer. It's a completely different mindset. And the problem occurs when Donald Trump views our allies as people to be rooked, people to be insulted, people to use the leverage to get the most out of the current situation with them instead of trying to develop the long-term business relationship that is really the basis of the long-term economic security of our country. And that's my best understanding of why the president does these things. Because certainly he has his advisors that let him know that his policies are going to have disastrous economic effects. In fact, just a couple of nights ago in an interview, President Trump declined to rule out the possibility of a recession, which I imagine his competent advisors have been shouting in his ear for weeks now. As I said earlier, there are no winners in a trade war. There are only those who are left to bear the burden of higher costs, lost jobs, and economic instability. Instead of strengthening our economy, Trump and his Republican allies are needlessly putting it at risk, gambling with the livelihoods of American families. So if the U.S. indeed enters a recession, we will know who to blame. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, for 30 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the topic of this special order.
Without objection.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. I appreciate my colleagues who are also members of the Border Security Caucus. For 4 years, we've stood here and exposed the open border policies of the Biden-Harris administration. For 4 years, we've seen what happens when the America First border security policies that President Trump had put in place were thrown out. And in just over 1 month, we've seen what happens when those policies are put back in place. Since President Trump took office, ICE agents have arrested more than 20,000 illegal aliens. That's just in 1 month. By comparison, Joe Biden only had 33,000 at-large arrests for the entire year of 2024. And when Joe Biden was in charge, over 300,000 illegal aliens crossed the border in just 1 month. In President Trump's first month, illegal crossings did not even reach 10,000. The actual number was 8,400. And whereas Biden let all of those people into the country without proper vetting, some of which were known criminals and terrorists that we're now trying to find, under President Trump, people who illegally cross the border are stopped and immediately detained or removed. Because of President Biden's catch and release policies, every state had the pathologies of a border state. Because of this, immediately after taking office, President Trump charged ICE officers with cleaning up streets across the country by detaining the illegal aliens that Joe Biden had released into the country. And while they were attempting to prosecute him, President Trump, for bogus charges in multiple jurisdictions, the Biden regime was releasing actual criminals into every city in America. Tonight, we're going to be exposing the Biden-Harris administration's open border policies and President Trump's work to remove them. We'll highlight the tireless work of ICE agents tasked with arresting some of the worst individuals who have invaded our country, despite being demonized by the mainstream media and organized campaigns to interfere with and prevent arrests, including by exposing personal information of agents. In just 1 month, those agents have taken thousands of violent and malevolent offenders off of our streets.
In just 1 month, President Trump has put an end to the endless invasion of our communities by illegal aliens. It's my pleasure now to yield to my co-chairman of the Border Security Caucus 3 minutes to the gentleman, Mr. Babin.
Thank you to my good friend, Andy Biggs from Arizona, and my co-chair. Really appreciate you having tonight's very important special order. Well, the truth is simple. The Biden administration threw open the floodgates, allowing murderers, rapists, and chaos to pour into our communities, all in pursuit of political power. They knew exactly what they were doing. Securing the border was never an impossibility, as they let the nation and us believe. It was always a choice, and for the last 4 years, the wrong choice was deliberately made. We were told that enforcement wouldn't work, that the crisis was simply too big to fix, but those were lies. Lies meant to cover up the fact that an open border was exactly what they wanted to do. They dismantled every tool that worked, inviting criminals to walk right in. And we saw the consequences play out in the most destructive ways imaginable. 15 million illegals entered under the Biden administration's watch. Tonight, you will hear about the evils that were unleashed onto our neighborhoods by the Biden administration, resulting in death and destruction of innocent American lives. How many more lives must be lost? How many more families must grieve before they admit their open border agenda is destroying this country? 100,000 Americans per year dying of deadly Mexican cartel and Chinese drugs that have come in over our open border. Hundreds of thousands of lost children from the child sex trade and human trafficking, murders, rapes, and pillaging from illegal alien gangs, swamped public schools, hospitals, and public services. But here's the good news, folks. The days of lawlessness are over, because on day one of the Donald Trump administration, we finally have a strong leader in the White House. And just like that, the border was shut down. All it took was that leadership and the will to enforce the law. The message was sent loud and clear. America is not open for lawbreakers anymore. Illegal crossings have plummeted. Deportations are back in full force. And as co-chair of the Border Security Caucus, I'm committed to keeping these dangerous criminals off of our streets. Working hand in hand with President Trump, with Vice President Vance, and leaders like Tom Homan, we're making sure that child traffickers, drug smugglers, and gang members are rounded up and sent packing back to where they belong. We are kicking them out by the thousands, just like we should have been doing all along these last 4 years. This is how you put America first, folks. You don't make excuses, you act. You don't let criminals run free. You lock them up or send them home. You don't leave the border wide open. You shut it down and you take control. The American people deserve safety, not suffering. They deserve law and order, not chaos. They deserve leadership that protects them, not one that absolutely betrays them. And that's what Donald Trump and Tom Homan are delivering to us right now, and they are just getting started. And with that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman who's seen in his own district time and time again the abuse caused by this out-of-control illegal aliens.
Man.
And now it's my pleasure to yield to my friend from Wisconsin, also in the Border Security Caucus, the gentleman, Tom Tiffany, for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, I want to say thank you to the gentlemen that have led the Border Caucus, Mr. Babin and Mr. Biggs. Thank you so